This time on my Cypher camera series, I'm going to be going over the map Bind. I split this video into 5 categories: A site boosted, A site, B site, attacking, and finally postplant. If you're new here, I made 2 other Cypher camera videos on Split and Ascent. If you want to check those out, link will be down below. First up, I'm going to show you how to correctly boost players. If you don't have friends like me, as I recorded this on 2 computers, you can skip to 5 minutes and 39 seconds. The setup I'm using has the boosted player already in the corner while the friend walks up and touches the boosted player. Next, for optimal results, crouch and take a few micro steps back to get the boosted players some room to jump. After this, you're all set, and with a 3, 2, 1 countdown, the boosted player should jump, and the booster needs to hold forward until the boosted player gets stuck. This allows the boosted player a platform to jump off of and get onto the boxes. Once boosted, there's a skill jump that will require some practice in order to place a lot of these cameras. First up, I'm going to be showing off the Bind spawn peak cameras that I discovered. The first one shows off how you can run, jump, and place the camera in case you're in a hurry and can't get the lineup set up. This next camera is the same as the first camera, but done with the lineup so it can't be messed up. You need to align with the corner on the booth and walk straight out until you almost reach the lines on the ground. After that, you can align the camera on the ventilation and jump, place the camera on the water tower. From here, I set up some guns to show where the spawn wall is, and as you can see, the enemies can be seen walking around towards the A lobby. This can give you vital information on if the enemies are actually coming to take a site. Do note that using the camera on the booth is not advised by the Click company, as it can result in an early death. A site spawn peak camera number 3. This is a spawn peak camera for people who do not want to jump on the booth and possibly miss the jump. Even though this is a spawn peak camera, its visibility is limited compared to the other spawn peak cameras. As shown from the camera, you can see the top part of the enemies and you can only see half of the choke. This camera is a lot easier to place than the water tower camera and is a lot safer, but what you gain in that department, you lose in visibility. A site billboard camera. This camera is another after the round starts camera, so lining up the crosshair on the billboard while the wall is still up is necessary. This camera gets visibility for short, as well as being one of the highest placeable cameras on the A site. If you time this correctly, you can place the camera and get the animation off before anyone peeks the corner besides like a Razor or a Jet. A site boosted telephone wire. This camera gives great vision towards the attackers, but it's likely that if this camera is used too often, then it'll be shot right away. I would say this camera is great to be placed and used later in the round rather than right away, because if timed correctly, the enemies will have to look directly up at the camera in order to shoot it. A site electrical camera. This camera is a glitch camera that will likely be patched out of the game in the upcoming updates, and I'm including it to spread its awareness. The entire texture of the electrical wiring is completely see-through for the minimap, so even if you place the camera in a completely black area, you can use the minimap as a UAV. This is a great camera to check once enemies have entered the site, as you can see all the way into A heaven. You can also use this camera to scout where the enemies have planted on the A site, as it covers a lot of the most common planting areas. The rest of this is just showing how far back the camera actually sees, as you can see on the minimap. The Cypher is pushed all the way up into the back of A site and you can still see him. A site short watch number 1. This camera has to be placed after the round starts. Timing wise, I found the wall doesn't drop at exactly 0-0 and it's better to go off the sound countdown. Jumping and placing at the final ding allows you to place right away and get out of that dangerous position. As you can see, the camera gets great vision of anyone walking up short, and there isn't a place where enemies can walk without you being able to see them. A site short watch number 2. This camera is one of the cameras that can be placed before the round starts. The best way to use this camera is to place it in a high position and then have the camera face downward as shown in the video. Yes. This allows you to get a bird's eye view of the short area. While you can't see the enemies pushing all the way up to the boxes, you can see the enemies when they push past the choke and towards the A site. If the camera survives the enemies pushing up middle and the enemies are pushing to plant on the A site, then this camera gives an insane vision of the entirety of A site and you can scout any of the enemies that are trying to plant. As shown from the enemy POV, this camera isn't visible for them pushing up through A short. The only way that they can know that this camera is here if they are pushed all the way back against the A short wall or they hear you open and close the camera. Even when hiding in A cubby, the enemies can't see the camera. A Sight solar panel camera. This camera is great for people who don't want to risk jumping on the booth and missing the jump. This is a great hidden camera as the location where it's placed is very cluttered with objects. Placing the camera can be very complicated, but once placed, this camera gives great vision into a short, mainly the market side. While this isn't the best camera for watching short, it's a great alternative camera. Do note that people can slowly walk up behind the box without being seen. Next, we'll be moving on to normal A-Sight cameras. A-Sight telephone wires camera. This camera is a lot like the previous boosted telephone wire camera, but can be placed from the A tower. This camera gives you a bird's eye view of the entirety of A-Sight, as well as great vision into A short. You can also get a nice pixel angle view of anyone hugging the A market sidewall. Another plus is being able to see into A bath. From the enemy point of view, the camera looks like a floating camera. It's likely that this camera will get shot after being spotted, but while the camera is up, it provides some insane vision of the A site. With this camera, there's no sneaking around from A short. Once the players cross the box barrier, this camera will spot them. A site bathroom attic. For this camera, it's more of an idea rather than a specific spot. There's a lot of places in the attic you can place the camera, and each has their own benefits. If you want to see more of the back bath, then you want to place the camera on the wall shown. This position gives vision towards the back bath and towards the orb, but the camera is very noticeable as the position is likely to get shot. Another camera spot for viewing the entrance and a little bit of the bath area is placing the camera on this box. It gives vision along the wall as well as anyone walking out of bath. A site lamp camera. This is another bath camera that can be used to scout anyone inside the bath as well as giving perfect vision of the orb. Although you can't see outside of the bath and into the attacker spawn, this camera does give vision into every single corner of the A bathroom once inside. From the enemy point of view, they will have visibility on the camera as they walk into the bathroom. A site bathroom window camera. With this camera, you can safely place it without any enemies being able to shoot you with some practice. The longer you take to set it up, the likelier you will get shot. This camera covers the entrance into showers as well as having vision through the window towards the attacker spawn. You can also cover the orb with the camera and some parts of the inside of the bath. A site cubby camera. For this camera, we'll be using the hanging wires to place the camera. You can use any spot on the wires, but my favorite has to be placing the camera directly in the corner of the rafters and the wall. With this camera, you can observe anyone walking up short, and the likelihood of this camera being noticed is very low because of its positioning. A site ventilation camera. This camera is a low budget version of the camera you throw from the top of the booth. As a plus side, you don't have to get boosted for this camera. From my experience, the best way to use this camera is to look straight down as it gives great visibility of short and anyone walking through the choke. This camera does get some visibility of the A site, mainly when the player is planting default. A site solar panel camera. I've already shown a solar panel camera, but this camera can be placed from A tower and doesn't require a boost. For this camera, you need to walk as far out as possible to get in range to place the camera. This camera gives you vision of the entirety of A site as well as some great vision down A short. This camera is very noticeable though, as it's in line of sight of the enemies walking right through A short. A site tower ventilation camera. If you're looking for a more passive camera angle, like if the enemies always take A short and you haven't been able to stop them, then this is the camera for you. This camera gives great vision of enemies who have passed the choke and are moving towards the A site, as well as some vision into the bathroom choke. You can even see if enemies are planting by the box, a common bathroom planting spot. Next, we'll be moving on to the B site. B site spawn watch camera. There are two cameras here, both of which are in this cubby. I'm not sure which is better. In my opinion, I think it's up to you. These cameras provide vision into A spawn whenever needed. The first camera gives you vision of deep CT spawn, as well as vision into elbow and that of B spawn doors. I think this is a great attacking camera. The next camera here you want to place as far right on the wall as possible. This provides the deepest vision possible into CT spawn. This camera also gives great vision of enemies walking up B long, as well as enemies hopping out of the hookah window onto the B site. And this is a great defending camera in my opinion. B site deep security camera number 1. This is a great hidden camera to scout hookah and long from. This camera is only visible from hookah when the enemies first pass into it and when the enemies first jump out of it. The camera is a great camera to play under hookah and spot some enemies inside and then spray to the lower wall. This camera gives a head glitch angle of enemies walking up long, and it's likely they will miss this camera. B site, deep security camera number 2. This camera is placed on the other side of the wall and gives a straight shot into hookah, as well as some vision into long, to spot any enemies trying to enter the B site. You can even see a player trying to take the orb. As you can see, there's an enemy B long, and we can see him cross using this camera. If you wanted to see all of hookah and none of long, you can move the camera a little bit to the right to see all the enemies inside hookah. B site, hookah ceiling camera number 1. Did you know that you can place cameras directly on the hookah ceiling? Well, I'll be showing you some right now. The first camera is placed directly above the choke and can see anyone walking into hookah. For the best outcome, I would look directly up and only use a sliver of the camera to spot the enemies, because the red light would be visible. You can also place this camera a little to the right and get a more hidden view of the enemies. You can see the entirety of hookah even though it's not shown, although the red fabric blocks a little bit of the view. B site, hookah ceiling camera number 2. This one's very hard from my experience and will take a little practice to place the camera quickly. This position uses the red fabric to hide the camera and allows you to see any enemies inside hookah, outside B short, as well as enemies in or around the teleporter. From my experience, looking straight down will allow you to see most of the window exiting hookah. B site, hookah glitch camera. This is a pretty basic camera and abuses the fact that this pillow allows you to place the camera inside of it. The pillow hides most of the red blinking light and is a great place to place the camera every once in a while. Again, this will probably be patched out of the game. B site, hookah skylight camera. This camera might be the hardest camera to place that I've ever found. Lining up here is necessary as we need the distance to place this camera. To place this, pixel perfect is an understatement, as you also need millisecond perfect mouse inputs to even place the camera. We're trying to place the camera on the wall outside of the skylight, and believe it or not, it is possible. Look at that, the camera's actually out there. I've been using this camera in Immortal games and have never once been spotted. You can see anyone trying to exit hookah, for example the Cypher. You can also see anyone trying to walk on the hookah box and get on top of it. Of my hookah cameras, this one isn't broadly useful, but it is one that no one will ever find. B site, long scout camera number 1. A ton of people know about this camera, as I think during the pre-alpha, the devs showed some gameplay of a Cypher using this spot. But even so, this is probably the most useful long scout camera out there. B site, long scout camera number 2. This camera is similar to the previous one, but is placed on the building and provides a hidden camera angle that people would rarely spot. Again, you can see anyone walking up B long with this camera, as shown on the minimap with the Cypher running around. The ladder is see-through and hides the camera very, very well. B site, short hookah camera. This camera, if placed without being seen, is one of the best hookah cameras out there. You can line this camera up during the pre-round phase. Do note that the camera makes sound while being placed, as well as has a trail from where you were to where the camera is placed. You can watch anyone walking into hookah or just lurking outside of it. Next, we'll be moving on to the attacking cameras. Attacking spawn peek camera. This camera requires a boost but allows the player to scout anyone who is playing short, unless they're tucked in a cubby, as well as any player playing A tower. For a quick refresher, we'll go over how to boost. First, you tuck the player who wants to be boosted in the corner, then the booster walks into the player and takes a mini step back. Then when coordinated, the player jumps and gets the booster to walk into the jumping player for a second. Then the booster stands up to get more height. This creates something for the player to jump off of and place the camera on the water tower. As you can see, they get great vision into A short, cubby, as well as anyone playing A tower. Attacking short scout camera. From the attacking side, you need to wait for the walls to be down. After that, you walk up into this cubby and get as high as possible on the wall to jump place the camera. This camera is out of some of the enemy's vision, and you can spot them hiding A short. A good combo is to place the camera and then have a teammate peek as soon as you place the camera. You can likely catch someone off guard who's looking up trying to destroy it. Attacking B long scout camera. This is a camera I use when lurking B side of the map. You can cover B long as well as T spawn. This camera isn't very technical, but it does warrant off enemies trying to lurk if they get spotted. Attacking deep B long camera. This camera you can place from the safety of fountain without peeking long. You can see into B site and spot anyone moving around as well. Just remember to check your corners because they can get into garden and hide before you can actually place the camera. Attacking Bath Scout Camera. This is another camera you can place from a safe spot. If done quickly enough, the enemies can't be there unless they are Omen, Raze, or Jet. From this position, you can place the camera on the corner in some decoration sticking out of the wall to hide this camera. I would say the main purpose for this camera is a scout, nothing more. From my experience, the enemy will shoot it really quickly. Attacking Hookah Scout Camera. This camera is one you can line up before the walls drop. This is a great camera to scout if enemies are playing aggressively in Hookah and trying to peek B short. Using the center of the box as my starting point, I then line up to jump place this camera. Some advice, place this camera and then walk back and hide in the corner. I've had some enemies swing on me and ruin my day because I can't get out of the camera quickly enough. Attacking A Short Scout Camera. This scout camera is placed from the market side this time. I'm using high textures to line up this camera. I put myself in the corner and then use the stain markings on the wall to line up where I want to jump place this camera. This camera gives great vision of the enemies playing default and could also be used as a good post-plant camera if placed in the right area. Sadly, short here gets neglected with this camera. Attacking Boosted Short Camera. This is the same camera as the previous one, but requires a boost to get in position. A lot like the Bath Side Scout camera, this boosted camera gives vision of both default as well as A short cubby and lamps area. Placing the camera can be a little glitchy because you're using a boost and not a direct corner, thanks to that rolled up mat in the corner. The practicality of this camera might not be the best, but the vision of the camera is pretty sick. Next, we'll be moving on to the Postplant Cameras. First up, we have A-Site Postplant Bath Watch Camera. A common play is to take quick control of Bath and then use a sage wall to plant the bomb on the corner of the site. This camera can be adapted to that play, but for now I'm using the default Bath plant to place the camera. Even when crouched and looking directly down, you can still see if the enemy is on the bomb, as well as mark them with the camera. A-Site Postplant Default Watch. This camera is great to watch enemies on the bomb, as well as watch enemies try and walk onto the A-Site from A-Short or Bath. The camera is very well hidden, and you should be crouched when placing the camera to mimic the LOS an enemy will have when defusing the bomb. If planted anywhere along the truck, you can even use this camera to see the enemies defusing there. This camera is an all-around good camera for planting, as you can even see the Bath default plant as well. B-Site Post-Plant Cubby Camera. This camera uses the hanging plant to hide the camera and scout any player trying to defuse the bomb. While planting, I line my crosshair up where I want it on the wall and then place the camera. You can also use the camera to scout enemies in CT. I think the enemies can defuse the bomb in the open towards Hookah, but you can still see the enemy's feet when they are defusing. B-Site Post-Plant Elbow Camera. I line my crosshair up right below the middle of the triangle. This is so right after planting, I can jump place the camera and not waste any time. This is probably my favorite post-plant camera, as there's no way an enemy defusing can see the camera. No matter how tucked they are in the corner, you can still see the enemy defusing. Thanks for watching. If you would, follow my Twitch channel where you can see me rage like this.
Like, how the fuck is the wall gonna break? Randomly!
And if you would, consider subscribing, as I'll be doing Haven as my final camera tutorial until a new map is released.